The world stage is bustling with significant events, and it is crucial to dissect them for a clearer understanding. Let us delve into some of these developments. Consider this proposition. What if 6 states within the United States, yes, genuine American states, could potentially alter their allegiance and integrate with Canada almost instantaneously? Imagine a scenario devoid of conflict, absent of dramatic upheaval, simply triggered by one pivotal event. Suddenly, borders are redefined, flags are exchanged, and passports require updating. Does that sound outlandish? Perhaps. However, these particular states already exhibit more Canadian characteristics than one might initially perceive. This is evident culturally, economically, and even politically. They are closer than you might imagine. A single tipping point is all that might be necessary to initiate such a transformation. And believe us, the final state on our list will genuinely surprise you. We will present our conclusions at the end of this analysis. Please subscribe to our channel and enable notifications so you do not miss insightful updates. Hitting the like button significantly helps us reach a wider audience, so we appreciate your support. We would also love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Let's begin with number 6. Oregon. What if a state seemingly deeply rooted in the American identity suddenly determined its future lies north of the border? Oregon, which might appear as a quintessential West Coast state, reveals deeper connections upon closer inspection. It's evident that Oregon and Canada are already practically inseparable. The similarities range from progressive political stances to environmental regulations. Oregon shares more in common with Vancouver than with its southern neighbors. Consider the economic ties. Trade exceeding $4 billion flows between Oregon and Canada annually. This isn't merely a cordial relationship. It constitutes a vital economic lifeline for the state. Yet, this economic interdependence is not the sole factor binding Oregon to Canada. The state has implemented policies concerning healthcare, climate change initiatives, and labor rights that closely parallel those found in Canada. In fact, conversations have emerged within Oregon regarding departure from the U.S. entirely. Interestingly, this sentiment isn't directed towards joining Idaho as part of the Greater Idaho movement, but rather towards becoming a part of Canada. Should the federal government persist in advancing policies that conflict with Oregon's core values, particularly concerning environmental and social matters, it wouldn't be entirely shocking if this West Coast state began seriously contemplating a northward shift in allegiance. Please ensure you watch this video until the very end, as we will be summarizing our key findings and offering concluding thoughts. And if that possibility seems extraordinary, prepare yourself. The subsequent state on our list possesses such profound economic integration with Canada that its survival without this connection is questionable. What might transpire if this state chose to sever ties with the U.S. and fully embrace its northern neighbor? Moving to number 5, Alaska. Picture this scenario. You reside in Alaska, often referred to as the last frontier, geographically detached from the contiguous United States. You might suddenly realize your proximity to Canada surpasses your distance to most other U.S. states. Alaska's geographical separation from the mainland is a significant factor, but its profound links to Canada extend far beyond sharing a northern border. The Alaskan economy is heavily interwoven with Canada's. Key sectors like oil, seafood, and natural resources demonstrate this interdependence, areas where Canada plays an indispensable role. Alaska's economy relies significantly on Canadian partnership. Some of Alaska's largest fishing enterprises depend on access to Canadian waters, and Canadian corporations hold substantial investments in Alaska's energy and natural resource sectors. Without this Canadian connection, Alaska's economy would face dire straits. However, the connections do not cease there. The military and defense collaboration between Alaska and Canada is remarkably strong. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, already integrates U.S. and Canadian forces. This implies that in a crisis, Alaska and Canada might collaborate closely long before significant U.S. involvement occurs. Alaska's history introduces another layer of complexity. It was once Russian territory before its acquisition by the U.S. in 1867. While it has remained American since that purchase, Alaska's deep-seated connections to Canada, both economic and cultural, could prompt serious contemplation about its future alignment. If a significant political or economic tipping point were ever reached, Alaska might reasonably look northward and question whether shifting its allegiance to Canada is the more logical path forward. And trust us, if that revelation was surprising, the next state presents an even more compelling case. Its ties to Canada are so extensive that if it were to suddenly become Canadian, the transition might seem almost seamless to many observers. Let's consider number 4, Vermont. This state possesses a notable history of independence. Before becoming part of the United States in 1791, Vermont existed briefly as its own republic. Fast forward to the present day, and you'll observe that Vermont's progressive policies and distinct culture often align it more closely with Canadian sensibilities than with the broader U.S. What's particularly intriguing is the existence of actual movements within Vermont advocating for secession from the United States. For years, an organization known as the Second Vermont Republic has promoted the idea of Vermont breaking away to potentially form its own nation, or even explore joining Canada. But what factors might lead Vermont down such a path? Firstly, let's examine Vermont's economy. The state maintains robust trade relationships with Canada, especially with the province of Quebec. Vermont's key industries, such as agriculture and clean energy, along with its approach to social programs, resonate strongly with Canadian counterparts. Vermont's economic interests are already substantially linked to Canada, making the concept of joining its northern neighbor appear as a pragmatic possibility. Furthermore, when you consider Vermont's shared cultural affinity with Canada, a mutual appreciation for maple syrup, the charm of small towns, and the allure of natural beauty, the idea seems less like a radical departure. Politically, Vermont's progressive orientation is far more congruent with Canada's approach to issues like healthcare, social welfare, and environmental protections than it is with many other parts of the U.S. Vermont residents are accustomed to embracing social policies that mirror those found in Canadian provinces. Therefore, should the prevailing political climate in the U.S. continue to diverge from Vermont's values, the prospect of looking northward might gain further traction. Given Vermont's unique history of independence, the notion of leaving the U.S. to forge a closer relationship with Canada might not be as outlandish as it initially sounds. And just when you believed the connections couldn't get any stronger, consider this. There's a state whose reliance on Canada is so profound that its economy could potentially unravel if that relationship were disrupted. Number 3 brings us to Michigan. Here, the idea of becoming Canadian might be more practical than one might initially assume. This state shares a connection with Canada that transcends mere geographical proximity. Michigan and Canada are so profoundly intertwined that severing these ties could potentially cause Michigan's entire economy to collapse. We are discussing approximately $80 billion in trade crossing the border each year. This staggering figure makes Michigan the U.S. state most economically dependent on Canada. The Detroit-Windsor corridor serves as one of North America's most active trade routes, with thousands of trucks transporting goods back and forth daily. But the intrigue deepens. Michigan's automotive industry, the very backbone of its economy, is heavily reliant on Canada. Some vehicles are assembled using components manufactured in both nations. It is impossible to discuss Michigan's economy without acknowledging its intimate relationship with Canada. The connection isn't solely economic. It extends to infrastructure as well. Michigan shares critical infrastructure with Canada, encompassing bridges, tunnels, and even power grids. For instance, the Ambassador Bridge, the busiest border crossing between the two countries, is owned by a Canadian billionaire. Adding to this, Michigan also depends on Canadian electricity to maintain power supply. Considering these factors, it begins to seem plausible that Michigan could function more like a Canadian province than a U.S. state. Historically, Michigan even considered joining Canada. Following the Toledo War in the 1800s, there were genuine discussions about Michigan merging with Canada instead of remaining with the U.S. While this merger did not materialize, the underlying sentiment has not entirely vanished. Consequently, if Michigan ever perceived that its interests aligned more closely with Canada's, Imagining the state shifting its orientation northward might not be as difficult as one might think. And if that wasn't sufficient food for thought, Michigan isn't the only state that could genuinely consider joining Canada. There is one more state on our list with an even more substantial bond to Canada, one that might compel you to reconsider the realm of possibility. Let's examine number 2, Minnesota. This state might catch you by surprise. It's not one typically associated with strong Canadian ties in the popular imagination. However, upon closer examination, the connections are unmistakable. Firstly, consider the geography. Minnesota shares a border with Canada stretching nearly 550 miles, but the relationship extends far beyond mere adjacency. In 2023 alone, Minnesota's exports to Canada exceeded $7 billion worth of goods. This positions Canada as one of the state's most crucial economic partners. That represents a substantial portion of the state's economy directly linked to Canada. The connection isn't limited to commerce. Minnesota and Canada share numerous cultural traits. Think of the friendly populace, a shared passion for outdoor activities, and the notoriously harsh winters that make the regional lifestyle almost indistinguishable from Canadian life. Indeed, some Minnesotans have even been mistaken for Canadians due to their accents. Let's delve further. Minnesota's political leanings also align more closely with Canada than with the U.S. on various issues. Progressive policies regarding healthcare, environmental protection, and social services are more in sync with Canada's approach than with the more conservative stances found in other U.S. states. Historically, Minnesota has demonstrated a greater openness to social programs and policies that reflect Canadian values. Politically, the state has generally been more receptive to the concept of a decentralized government and stronger social support systems, characteristics often associated with Canada. What's perhaps most surprising is that Minnesota wasn't always part of the U.S. Prior to achieving statehood in 1858, the territory was under British governance, and its fur trade had significant ties to Canada. This historical connection remains palpable today, with many residents having family in Canada or even possessing dual citizenship. Given this backdrop, some experts speculate that if the U.S. were to face a major political or economic crisis, Minnesota might look north for its future. With so many existing connections, economic, cultural, and historical, it's not entirely far-fetched to envision segments of Minnesota's population advocating for a shift towards Canada, especially if they feel their values are better represented by their northern neighbor. And just when you thought Minnesota was the most surprising candidate, hold on. The final state on our list boasts an even deeper, more intricate connection to Canada. You might not believe how close the relationship truly is. Finally, number 1. Washington. Let's discuss Washington State. You might associate it primarily with tech behemoths and a vibrant coffee culture. However, something much more significant is developing beneath the surface, a potential shift towards Canada that is closer than you might realize. Washington's relationship with Canada extends far beyond simple neighborly status. The state is deeply connected to Canada economically, politically, and culturally. In 2023, Washington conducted over $20 billion in trade with Canada, solidifying its position as one of the states most economically reliant on its northern neighbor. But the ties are not confined to trade alone. Washington also depends on Canada for energy resources, receiving substantial amounts of hydroelectric power from British Columbia. When you consider how intertwined these two regions are, the question naturally arises: could Washington potentially fare better as part of Canada? It's not just about the financial aspects. Washington's policies and political landscape often align more closely with Canada than with the rest of the United States. On matters such as healthcare, environmental safeguards, and social services, Washington's progressive stance mirrors Canada's approach much more than it does the more conservative policies found elsewhere in the U.S. For example, Washington has been actively exploring closer integration with British Columbia, including proposals for a high-speed rail link that would connect Seattle to Vancouver in less than 2 hours. While ambitious, this initiative demonstrates a clear desire for deeper integration with Canada, not detachment. The cultural overlap is also undeniable. From Vancouver down to Seattle, residents share similar lifestyles, a love for outdoor adventures, a technologically driven economy, and yes, a profound appreciation for coffee. People frequently travel back and forth across the border, with numerous British Columbians employed in Washington while maintaining their Canadian residency. Considering Washington's shared culture with its northern counterpart, it almost appears as though the state already operates like a Canadian province in many respects. What makes this scenario particularly compelling is that some politicians in Washington have openly discussed the possibility of deeper economic integration with Canada. If the United States were ever confronted with a significant political or economic crisis, it wouldn't be entirely unexpected if Washington began looking northward instead of eastward for its future. The state's profound economic, political, and cultural bonds with Canada could very well spark serious conversations about whether remaining within the U.S. truly serves Washington's best interests. And there you have it. Could these states genuinely break away and align themselves with Canada? Only the future holds the definitive answer, but the deep-seated connections are certainly present and warrant consideration. If you found this exploration insightful, please remember to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content on economics and politics. Your support helps us grow. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.